You finally arrived at the chapter house in Chertsey Abbey, about 25 miles outside London. In this reconstruction, you see a door out to the cloister set into one wall of the room. Along the other walls of the chapter house extend benches where Chertsey's monks would have sat to listen each day to a chapter from the rule of St. Benedict, hence the name chapter house, referring to a space in which various kinds of abbey business were conducted. Chertsey's chapter house would also have welcomed illustrious visitors, bishops and kings, who would have run their own meetings and signed their own documents in this space, too. You see beneath your feet the stunning inlaid floor tiles known as the Chertsey tiles, the most famous medieval floor tiles in England, and, arguably, the most sophisticated floor tiles surviving from all of medieval Europe. Yet the Chertsey tiles were discovered in the 19th century as a pile of fragments. Their extraordinary images of knights and lions, their many lines of Latin text, were shattered into hundreds of tiny pieces. More than a century after the discovery of the fragmented tiles, in the 1970s, a curator at the British Museum physically reconstructed 2 roundels, which have been on display at the British Museum ever since. These are the 2 roundels you saw when you entered, showing the English king, Richard the Lionheart, and the Ayyuban Sultan, Saladin. Here you see these 2 roundels in our reconstruction of the Chertsey floor. Although it was well known that Latin texts had originally surrounded each circular tile, the 1970s reconstruction did not incorporate any text. Instead, the British Museum reconstruction uses crowns where the letters had been. In 2017, our team took on the challenge of photographing all known fragments of the Chertsey Combat Series tiles, both images and texts, and reassembling them. We relied on purpose-written computer code to compare the pieces of text remaining with longer Latin chronicles describing similar military subjects. We sorted through many possibilities for each string of letters and relied on clues from other extant tiles, as well as word frequency dictionaries, to assemble our final reading. Through a long process, and with help from many individuals along the way, we have reassembled the lost texts that may have surrounded each image. Our completed reconstruction has enabled us to rediscover the original intent behind the combat tile floor. Although previous scholars had interpreted the floor as a series of combats, evidence from the reconstructed images and texts reveal that the focus of the entire floor was the Crusades. Because art made during the period when the Crusades to the Holy Land were actively being pursued, around 1100 to 1300, is surprisingly rare, our conclusion suggests that this floor is even more significant than scholars had previously realized. The floor shows us a fictional English victory in the Crusades, led by Richard the Lionheart. Richard is shown here having pierced his enemy Saladin with a lance. Saladin slumps on his mount, stares at us cross-eyed. The scene is entirely fictional. Not only did Richard never best Saladin in single combat, Richard and Saladin never even met in single combat. In fact, although they were opponents in the Third Crusade, they never met face-to-face. The Third Crusade ended with a truce, and Richard returned to France. This apparent English crusading victory, then, is propaganda. It constructs a view of the English king in a way that is advantageous to him, but is not true. Other tiles represent other subjects that relate to the Crusades. For instance, a trial by combat, shown here, suggests that, as with a trial by combat in the Crusades, God will choose the victor. We see several men fighting lions, and indeed many crusaders were said to have met and battled lions while in crusade. The Old Testament hero Samson, here, shown tearing the lion apart using only his bare hands, also provides a precursor to Richard the Lionheart, both exceedingly strong men associated with lions. In the same mode, this mounted warrior wearing a toga and sporting bare feet and ringlets, seems to be a classical hero who also fought lions, possibly Alexander the Great. This man turns 180 degrees in his saddle to shoot at an enemy behind him. This impressive maneuver is known as the Parthian shot. Long associated with Western Asian fighters, this crusader has adopted his enemy's tactics as his own. Both the soldiers and the lion hunters appeared in a varied but contiguous and continuous struggle. The fighting spills across the countryside. Men battle against other men and fierce beasts. Combatants show their God-given courage and superhuman strength. The floor contains events from the past at different times. Biblical history with Samson, Greco-Roman history, as suggested by the classicizing writer, and recent history under Richard the Lionheart. Still, all these events, both in the distant and more recent past, are located in the Christian Holy Land, in the Eastern Mediterranean, where lions live and great deeds are done. Art historians have long argued that such a sumptuous floor must have been a royal commission. And indeed, there are related floor tiles surviving at Westminster Abbey's chapter house in London, made around 1250. The English king and queen at that date were Henry III and Eleanor of Provence. Now, this is about 50 years after Richard the Lionheart's death. Richard was the uncle of Henry III. Evidence suggests that it was not Henry III, but rather the queen, Eleanor of Provence, who may have initially commissioned these tiles for her own chambers. Later, the molds used to make the tiles were moved to Chertsey Abbey, which is where the combat tiles were discovered in the 1800s. The discovery of the tile series' original theme, the Crusades, was not the only important moment in our process. The assembly of the roundels and texts into a floor, as the tiles would originally have been laid, was similarly significant. The tiled floor showed a strong resemblance, both in its subject matter and in its layout, to imported Islamic and Byzantine silks from the Holy Land. These silks, many of which are on display elsewhere in the exhibition, show images of lions and combats and horsemen and roundels. These silks with figural designs, lightweight but valuable, were among the most popular souvenirs brought home by returning crusaders. For the Chertsey tiles, showing an English crusading victory in a way that alluded to the fine silks acquired on campaigns to the Holy Land, was another way of underlining the crusading theme of the floor. Hence the title of our exhibition, Bringing the Holy Land Home. While many may think of medieval England as an isolated place, cut off from networks of communication and exchange, the Chertsey tiles show that this was not the case. The medieval English, like many Europeans, carried precious objects home from overseas, including art objects made by Islamic and Byzantine craftsmen. Although both Islamic and Byzantine realms served as opponents of the Crusaders, this military opposition does not seem to have interfered with English appreciation of their fine metalwork, glass, ceramics, and silk. Both the subject matter and the formal appearance of the Chertsey tiles witness English fascination with the Eastern Mediterranean and English usage of visual languages deriving from far overseas to construct their own images of English history, desires, and destiny.